Okay,
Yeah.
so moving forward, meanwhile, while a lot of partying is happening at the White House and weird stuff happening outside the White House, because of the Biden regime, some really serious yucky stuff is happening too. So, what struck me was this came, and we had a conversation last night, and then right after, I think, or the next morning, this happened, where now Biden made a statement at the Nordic thing saying that Putin has lost Ukraine, he lost the war, and then he announces he's sending troops without congressional approval. I mean, what's your thought on this?
Well, the AUMF, right, gives him that power. He doesn't need congressional approval. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time, Pasta and I. This is something that we knew it was going to come back and bite everybody in the arse. And it's not surprising because we already have troops via NATO stationed there. There are a lot of witnesses that have heard, especially in Donbass, people speaking English, soldiers speaking English, and so on and so forth. So there's definitely Brits and Americans and all of that. So this just signifies a more obvious situation where they're sending now more direct soldiers. I do see it as more of an escalation, but at the end of the day, Russia knows this is nothing new. They know that they're NATO, and the US is leading NATO, is really trying to do everything they can to prolong this conflict, even though they know Ukraine cannot win this conflict. And that's becoming more clear every day. And the reality is they're doing this because they have zero desire to actually help Ukrainians. This is just, using Ukraine as a proxy. And I think the NATO summit really showed that Ukraine is exactly that Zelensky and all the memes we saw, he's literally just being weaponized by the elite class, and he thinks he's one of them, but really he isn't. He's just an actor, a clown of sort of entertainment that they're using. And it's really sad almost in a way, but he knows what he got himself into. What's sad is the people that are dying as a result of this continued, both Ukrainians and Russians. And again, like I've said this as much, I've never met a single Russian that has wished horrible things on Ukrainians. Like they'll tell you their experiences, and under like the people who've lived in Donbass, they'll say this is terrible and this is what Ukraine did to us, but they won't be this evil sort of person that the West has created us to believe.
Yeah, I mean, for 9 years, the Kiev regime has been bombing the Donbass region and the people. I mean, imagine living somewhere and being bombed by your own government and being, how frightening that is, and how horrible. And do you feel like the narrative is being lost? Like, do you think that the Western NATO narrative is still being held on to, or do you think NATO is slipping? And do you think they're losing? In other words, is there a possibility that we could actually abolish NATO? Is it a possibility, or is it out of reach?
I think that the only people that could abolish NATO are the American people, and meaning US American people, because we are exporting the hegemony, right? Our country has exported this hegemony. We are responsible. Our country, our government is responsible for the killings, for the regime changes, for these coups, for these interventionist policies that have killed millions of people in Afghanistan and Iraq, combined with the total years and years that we've done. And so at a certain point, this is a discussion I've had with people. I do feel like it falls on the shoulders of the American public, because if somebody comes from outside and intervenes with us, you're an American, so it's going to put you in that situation. And nobody wants to invade a nuclear power like the United States. Right. So it's going to take the American people to actually do something about this. But I feel like the American people aren't there yet, because they're still stuck in playing pretend with these elections. And I'm not supporting anyone in these elections, because I could from abroad, I absolutely could, but we're beyond that point in the United States. And so that I think Americans are still stuck in this idea that if they vote, they'll somehow change something. And it's just past that point. And they really have to figure out ways to move things without the electoral system. And that's the only way you could abolish NATO. It's really easy to say abolish NATO, we need to get rid of NATO,
Right.
but to put the actual organizing and actual movement building outside of the electorate is a lot harder. And it's been done before in terms of creating new parties, in terms of taking over the government. But this is something that I think it's going to take some time and more direct Americans to be directly affected, because you see Europeans protest because they're directly affected.
Right.
We have mostly escaped that, except now, like we've seen the inflation, but Europe is far more dependent on that, on this Russian energy. So they were able to feel it more. They've been out in the streets, and it's more of their culture as well. We're a lot more comfortable and we are a lot more protected from everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I agree with you 100% as far as not voting. I mean, I'm here in Moscow and, you know, like in 2020, I didn't vote. Fee, I don't know if you knew that, but like, I'm an independent now. Obviously, I'm not a Democrat anymore, but I felt like you did, that there was no integrity to the elections, but we're not allowed to say that. And when you say that out loud on YouTube, they take down your whole video and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's really meaningful to question the electorate. That's part of democracy, is to question the integrity. And I've heard you and Pasta have that long discussion about that.